From KOMU 8 News, live from the Missouri Theater in Columbia, this is the 2016 Missouri Republican Gubernatorial Debate, hosted by KOMU 8, the Columbia Chamber of Commerce, and the University of Missouri.
Good evening, everyone. It's a big night, an exciting night here in Columbia, Missouri. Thanks for joining KOMU 8 TV. I'm Jim Reek, along with my colleagues here, Brittany Pieper and Ashley Holt, and welcome to the beautiful Missouri Theater in downtown Columbia.
For the next hour and a half, the four candidates on the Republican side vying for your vote for the next Missouri governor will answer our questions as well as some of yours.
That's right. For the past few weeks, we have been asking you what questions you would like to ask those candidates, and we are going to get through some of those tonight, but make sure that you follow us on Twitter throughout the debate using the hashtag KOMOGovDebate.
Let's introduce the candidates. We'll start from left to right. Please welcome Mrs. Catherine Hannaway. Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder. Mr. Eric Greitens. Mr. John Bruner. Okay.
Thanks to the audience for your enthusiasm. Now for a few ground rules for everyone. Candidates, some of tonight's questions will be directed to all of you, but there are also some that will just be directed to one or maybe two of you. So, for a specific question that we ask you, whether it's all four or just one, each person we ask it to will have 90 seconds for the initial question. Then if we ask a follow-up, you'll have 60 seconds to answer that follow-up question. And if one of you mentions someone else, they do get a chance to respond. You'll have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Kelly Ann Coates from the Columbia Chamber of Commerce will be keeping time for us tonight. And candidates, please note you will not be allowed to ask each other questions.
In other words, the follow-up questions will be asked by us.
Sure.
We did a coin flip. The first opening statement will be offered by Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder.
Thank you. In choosing a candidate for governor to go into the fall election this fall, you need a conservative fighter for Missouri, a conservative you can trust, and one you can trust to actually win elections. I am the only candidate on this stage who has ever won a statewide election. I'm the only candidate on this stage and in this race who has the Missouri Right to Life Defender of Life Award on my wall for passing the first bill banning partial birth abortion. I'm the only candidate on this stage and in this race who has the National Rifle Association's highest rating of A+ for having delivered to Missourians over a Democratic governor's veto the right to carry concealed weapons, defending our Second Amendment rights. I'm proud of that record. It's a record I can take, as I have 3 times before, statewide to the people of this state. For the last 7 years, I've been often the only voice on the conservative side who would stand up to the left-wing liberal policies of Barack Obama, Jay Nixon, and Chris Koster, to call them out on Obamacare when the latter two would not put Missouri in that lawsuit. I went out and filed my own private lawsuit because I wanted somebody to stand up for the rights of Missourians to direct our own health care choices. And then again, with the catastrophic failure of Nixon and Koster on Ferguson, I was the one who was out there calling them out, holding their feet to the fire, and you saw me on many of those appearances. And then last November, when those two, Nixon and Koster, brought us a Ferguson on the campus of this university here in Columbia and disgraced the name of this fine university across this country, I was the one who called them out and said there has to be an end to this politically correct foolishness governing the campus. Too much of the life on the campus. I've been out there fighting for right to work these last number of years and trying to round up the votes, and I will sign that bill into law in my first 2 months in office, and we'll get Missouri back in business again.
Catherine, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening. I want to thank the Columbia Chamber, the University of Missouri, and KOMU for hosting this forum. I want to thank all of you for being here and for watching at home. Our government is too big and it's fundamentally broken. People don't trust the government, and they certainly don't trust politicians. and for good reason. At the very minimum, our government should keep us safe, and it's failing even at that. The murder rates in Missouri's 3 largest cities are skyrocketing. The state was embarrassed before the nation by the riots in Ferguson and the protests here at the University of Missouri. And while all that was happening, what did our state's chief law enforcement official, Chris Koster, do to defend this state? Nothing. As a former federal prosecutor, I've prosecuted over 4,000 cases. As governor, I will bring conservative solutions to our state's toughest problems. But it won't be easy. It wasn't easy when I put hardened criminals behind bars or corrupt politicians. But we've got to have a governor who will stand up against the insiders, against the special interests. We have been 47th in growth over the last decade. We have got to have a governor who will stand up against the trial lawyers and the labor union bosses. We're the worst state in the country at moving people from welfare to work. I will put an end to dumping more money into failed solutions. The enrollment and donations are down at the University of Missouri. As governor, I will stand up to restore it as our flagship public university. Actions speak louder than words. When tonight is over, I want you to ask yourself, who has put forward a concrete action plan to solve Missouri's toughest problems? Who up here will make Missouri safe and strong again? Thank you.
Mr. Bruner, you have 2 minutes.
Well, welcome to all those who are watching at home. We have a full house here tonight, and we got a full stage. It's good to be here. I've been privileged to serve on the mission field all around the world. I've also been privileged to serve as a platoon commander in the United States Marine Corps. I want to give a salute to all of our veterans. You know, not everyone on this stage is a lifetime constitutional conservative, but I've been fighting for these principles for decades. And the number one principle is to fight for life. I will also fight for our First Amendment rights, the right to our religious liberties, and I will fight for our Second Amendment, our right to carry and bear arms, all of our Bill of Rights, and the 10th Amendment rights in terms of leaving those privileges and rights back to the states. You know, not everyone on this stage can say that they are truly an outsider. I've never served in political office before, and I will continue to do what I can here to bring in those fresh ideas and new ideas here. As an outsider, I'm not looking to jumpstart a political career or extend a political career. I'm simply here to do the job. You know, I'm the only one on this stage who's brought billions of dollars of business back to Missouri and created thousands of jobs. It's all about getting results and getting the job done. You know, when we bring jobs back to this economy, that is a foundation for better roads. When we bring jobs and improve this economy, that's the answer to help get our schools back in shape. It's all about results. You know, in business, if you don't get results, you go out of business. So, my friends, if you're looking for results for a change, I'm your choice for the next governor of Missouri. Thank you.
Mr. Greitens, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, good evening and happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm here tonight with a very simple message. Politicians have failed us, and we can't trust them to fix the mess that they've created. I've never run for office before. I'm a Navy SEAL, an entrepreneur, and a concerned husband and father. I'm running for office because I cannot stand by and watch as the political establishment continues to hurt real people. My opponents have been in over 20 different elections combined. Now, if they were going to make a difference, wouldn't they have done it already? Missouri has become a state riddled by serial corruption, national embarrassment, and epic failure. There was the crisis and lawlessness at Ferguson because of the absent leadership of our Attorney General. The crisis right here on campus at the University of Missouri that spun out of control because our governor wouldn't go to the front lines. We also have the crisis in our economy where we are 47th in growth and 42nd in wage growth. Businesses are leaving Missouri, and people who are lucky enough to have a job aren't seeing a raise. And that's because the political and economic system is so rigged that oftentimes it's difficult to tell the difference between the lawmakers and the lawbreakers. Government at every level is broken. They fail to do what they're supposed to do and love to do what they shouldn't do. We've got the VA failing veterans, the EPA harassing farmers, the IRS targeting people of faith. You need a governor who will fight to protect you. Now, my boxing coach used to always say, if you want different, do different. If you want a different result, then you're going to have to take different action. And that's what this election is all about. If we want a different result from our government, then we are going to have to take action. So tonight, I invite you to join me, take action with me, because with strong conservative leadership from outside of the political establishment, we can turn Missouri around.
Thank you very much.
Audience.
Quickly, all right, thank you very much. I would like to remind our candidates that the ding means your time is up, and our studio audience, now that we are done with opening statements, please hold any applause and cheering until the end when we get to closing statements. We have a lot of questions, and that will help us to get through as much good content as we can. So we appreciate you holding your applause and cheers. Now, we want to begin with a question for all of the candidates to answer. Missouri's unemployment rate is currently at 4.3%, the lowest since June 2001, but the latest census information puts the poverty rate at 15.5%. How would you attract higher paying jobs to the state of Missouri? We're going to, again, through a series of coin tosses, begin with Lieutenant Governor Kinder. You get to answer first, and you have 90 seconds.
Your question framed the issue exactly correctly. The Nixon-Obama Koster economy of the status quo is failing Missourians. As the headline in the Post-Dispatch said a couple of years ago, poverty up, incomes down. That was U.S. Census data. We need strong leadership to take Missouri on a U-turn from the course we've been on. We need a governor who will sign freedom to work legislation, one who's proven that he's a fighter for that legislation. With some of these other candidates, I don't know what you'll get. You know what you'll get from me based on my record. You know that I'll go to work trying to trim our tax code and especially reduce the income tax in this state that is too high at 6% and starts at a level that is too low in income. It starts at $6,000 for the highest rate of 6%. Now, how absurd is that? We are surrounded by tax-cutting states. We've got to get with the program of reducing our income tax because that's the dead weight on job creators, small businesses, which create most of the jobs in this state. I will cut regulations. I'll have a director of the Department of Natural Resources, like Governor Matt Blunt did, who will work with businesses while still protecting the environment and not be oppressive against those trying to invest and improve our state and hire other Missourians. I will look across the board for pro-growth policies of the kind I've described and implement them.
All right, Mr. Bruner, your thoughts.
Well, my entire career has been in the job-building business. I took a small manufacturing business with 30 or 40 people, worked hard over 30 years, and grew to be the largest in our industry. You know, there's always been a number of issues that I've dealt with personally, and I'm the only one on this stage who have dealt with these issues for decades. Number one, we need tort reform. Missouri, as a state here, is number 4 in the nation, a happy place to sue people. That does not cause job growth or job creation. Number 2, regulatory reform. It's out of whack. And if we can't keep up, especially the small businesses, with the increasing barrage of non-common sense regulations. And of course, we need to sign right to work. You know, in these 3 decades here, I know firsthand what the battles are and what the fights are. And we've been very fortunate over the years. It hasn't been a straight line up. We've seen the ups and downs, but I've seen the value of a good job. Manufacturing jobs, by the way, pay 27% more on a whole. That's what we need to bring manufacturing back to this state. You know, I can do it. I've done it. I want to carry this message all across the state. I know firsthand. And as CEO of Missouri to other CEOs, I can attract business back to the state. Our family has been in business 109 years. Let's make it happen for everybody else.
All right. The next answer will come from Mrs. Hannaway.
Thank you. You know, government doesn't create jobs. Hardworking Missourians create jobs and create good jobs. That's why I have a 5-point bold plan to get the government out of Missourians' ways. Number one, we need to reduce and simplify our tax code. Number two, as soon as right to work gets to the governor's desk, I will sign it. Number three, regulations are crushing small business. On day one of a Hannaway administration, I would freeze all new regulations. The barber regulation here in Missouri is 10,000 words long. The Book of Armageddon is the Book of Revelation is 10,000 words long. Surely we can tell a barber how many combs to have in fewer words than it takes to describe Armageddon. Number four, we've got to have a governor who will appoint conservative judges and work for meaningful tort reform to put an end to the frivolous lawsuits killing business opportunities. And number five, we have to train our workforce for the jobs that are out there, the good-paying, high-paying jobs. That's going to require an increased emphasis in and investment in technical and vocational education. Together, if we have these component parts, we can make our economy stronger, and if we make our economy stronger and our state safer, we're going to attract better jobs to Missouri.
All right, thank you. And finally, Mr. Greitens.
You know, ever since I came back from Iraq, I've been running my own business. I also started an organization, The Mission Continues, to help our returning veterans come home and get quality private sector employment and to start their own businesses. The first veteran who we worked with here in Missouri was a guy named Tim Smith. Now, Tim came home, he had some physical injuries. He also found himself waking up every night. He was looking underneath his bed for his rifle. He had some trouble relating to his wife, to his one young son. He had post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, we put Tim through our program at The Mission Continues. And today, Tim Smith, who could have spent the rest of his life on welfare and disability, instead, he runs his own business. It's a business right here in Missouri. It's called Patriot Commercial Cleaning. Tim's got 49 commercial cleaning contracts, and he's hired 42 other veterans. And it's not just Tim Smith. It's Anthony Smith, who is a veteran who was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade, who's come home, who started his own martial arts studio. It's Rachel Gutierrez, who's come home and has started her own consulting firm. I've worked with veterans on the front lines to help them to start their own businesses. And while government does not create jobs, government must create the conditions in which our business owners can own, run, and grow their businesses. And that's why we have to sign right to work. It's why we have to reduce regulations. It's why we have to end tax credit bribery and simplify the tax code. We have to do these things so that Missourians can get back to work.
All right. Again, please hold your applause, studio audience. I have a few follow-ups. This one will go to Lieutenant Governor Kinder. You mentioned bringing down income taxes. Our neighboring state, Kansas, has a significant budget shortfall right now that critics say was caused by deep tax cuts that came from 2012. How would your plan not have the same outcome?
We would be a little more incremental in taking the example of the state legislature, which the Republican majority, which is maligned by some on this stage, but I defend, overrode Governor Nixon's veto to give Missourians the first tax cut in a century last year, and it was an incremental tax reduction, but it was the first in a century. So we would not take a meat axe to the tax code. We would do it step by step, as some other states are doing, neighboring states, such as Arkansas, Nebraska, and others, Tennessee, to make Missouri more attractive to capital, investment, jobs, growth, and opportunity. You do it a little bit at a time. You phase it in over several years, and then the job creators and the investors know that their investment is going to be created, and they'll come to here. Once we pass right to work, this will be a magnet for jobs.
Thank you. The next follow-up, Ms. Hannaway. I would like to know, the Economic Policy Institute found that right-to-work states had an average of 3.2% lower wages. So how would right-to-work in Missouri help to increase pay? You have 60 seconds.
Well, that's just one study. There are many others, including from the Cato Institute, that say that right-to-work states are actually experiencing greater growth in the number of jobs that are available, greater increases in the rapidity at which people enjoy wage increases, and higher overall wages. In addition, in right-to-work states in the Midwest, more employees have health insurance. So I'll give you just one example that is very important to look at. Indiana became a right-to-work state recently. During that time period, they've actually added 50,000 union jobs. In that same time period, Missouri lost 5,000 union jobs. I'm for right to work because it's good for workers, and the experience of other states are that wages go up, they go up faster, there are more jobs to be had, and in fact, in talking with Governor Pence of Indiana, he said their jobs are coming there so quickly they can't even count them all.
All right. Mr. Bruner, you mentioned that as a businessman you would be able to attract businesses to Missouri. What types of industries would you try to bring here? 60 seconds.
Well, first of all, you have to have a vision. And that's the same vision my grandfather had over 100 years ago when he moved from Virginia to Missouri as a hub, an economic distribution hub for the entire country. We have the second, third largest rail depots. We have the largest river system. We have the sixth largest road system. In one day, we can ship to 50% of America. In 2 days, 90% of America. So it all begins with rebuilding our infrastructure and rebuilding our roads. And frankly, as a CEO to other CEOs, I have practical experience, a business that's been around for 100 years. You know, I don't need talking points, and I don't need to bring in the consultants. This has been part of my life for over 30 years. And I have confidence that we can make it happen right here in Missouri.
And a final follow-up to Mr. Greitens. You talk about simplifying the tax code. Can you give us some specifics on how you plan to do that?
Yeah, some very clear specifics. First of all, we have a tax code right now that's far too complicated. We have 10 different tax brackets, and if you're making $9,000, you're already in the top tax bracket. We need to have a simpler tax code that will actually reduce the tax burden on working families. In addition to that, we have a $26.9 billion budget, and we have all of these insider deals and tax credit programs that are worth over $500 million. We need to simplify the tax code and make it fair for average people around Missouri.
Candidates, Missouri roads are falling apart. They've been falling apart for 10 years, 20 years. Lawmakers have been talking about fixing the problem forever. Nothing's been finalized. If one of the four of you is elected, what long-term funding solution would you push for? And Mr. Bruner, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, Missourians are very clear. No more taxes, no more tolls, no more expenses that fight against the jobs and the opportunity to build more jobs here in Missouri. You know, the difference with so many people here in politics is they've never spent time as an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur, it's all about finding efficiencies and savings and waste. If you don't find these efficiencies, you go out of business. And I bring this mindset to Jefferson City. I've set a target of 3.8% savings. You know, 3.8% savings is $1 billion. That's great for a start. And the other issue is if we bring businesses to Missouri, we'll increase the revenues. And those increased revenues, we can allocate 25% or 20% of all increased revenues to a road and infrastructure program. But this is the tough decisions. There's so many bills that come into the House and the Senate every year. And what we need to do is look at the hard issues, the things that are going to make a change for 20 years. Our roads and infrastructure is so far behind that if we are going to attract these jobs, we have to possibly even reallocate the percentage that we do spend in our budget, which is presently only 7.8%. So it takes a leader, it takes a business person, it takes a person who's expanded and built businesses to understand how to set the priorities and get the job done.
Catherine?
Well, it's no wonder to me that Missourians overwhelmingly rejected a sales tax increase for transportation when it was on the ballot the last time. Because Missourians don't trust that MoDOT's going to spend their money efficiently. MoDOT has become like a stray dog. Once you feed it, it jumps back up on the porch over and over again. In the last decade alone, MoDOT has had stimulus money. They've had bonding money. And yet, once again, they're threatening not to maintain our roads and bridges unless they get a gas tax increase. We do need a plan. My plan has three parts to it. The first one is to make sure that MoDOT spends every penny it collects efficiently and to have accountability measures for how they're spending it. The second part of that plan is to make sure that the dollars collected in the gas tax are spent on roads and bridges. So I would move $200 million from general revenue into the transportation budget to fund the highway patrol. That would free up an additional $200 million for roads and bridges. Number three, we may need a shift in taxing priorities. If and only if we can cut the income tax, then perhaps we can increase the gas tax a little bit. I'm not going to increase the total tax burden on Missourians, but we could have a shift in priorities without raising your taxes 1 red cent.
Mr. Greitens?
Look, we have a major problem with roads and bridges here in Missouri, and that's because our politicians' backwards priorities. Right now in Missouri, we've got 3,500 structurally deficient bridges. The average family in Missouri, it costs them more than $700 a year in unnecessary car repairs because they're driving over broken roads and broken bridges. Now, we have to do this, but in order to do this, we have to change the way that politicians in Jefferson City currently do business. The way things work now is that at the beginning of the year, career politicians get together and they do something called the consensus revenue estimate, where they figure out how much of your tax money they're going to take from you, your families, and your businesses. And then they figure out how they're going to spend it all. When I'm governor, we're going to begin with the priorities of the people. And we're going to do zero-based budgeting so that we begin with people's priorities, so that we can properly fund our roads and our bridges. And you know what, guys? This isn't magic. In Indiana, they were able to invest an additional $1 billion into their roads and bridges without raising taxes. In South Carolina, they were able to invest an additional $1 billion into their roads and bridges without raising taxes. What it is going to take, though, is a strong leader from the outside who's tough enough to take on business as usual in Jefferson City. And that's what we're going to do when I'm governor.
Lieutenant Governor.
This is a tough problem, as has been noted. Missourians have repeatedly rejected proposals that have been put before them to increase the fuel tax, to increase the general sales tax. Just 2 years ago, they have rejected twice, that I'm aware of, constitutional amendments that would have permitted toll roads in our state. I think Missourians are looking for a governor who says to everyone in this state, and who has a track record of uniting Missouri urban and rural, as I do, that we're all in this together, that whether you live in southwest Missouri or the St. Louis metropolitan area or Kansas City or northwest Missouri or the Boot Heel, we're all in this together. And we've got to demonstrate to the tax-paying citizens of Missouri that we've recovered their public trust on spending. I don't believe this administration has that public trust. I don't believe Mr. Koster has that public trust. I believe you need an example like mine, where I've returned money unspent out of my office budget that I had a right to spend every year I've been lieutenant governor, on an average of 7.5 or 8% of my budget. I think regional transportation districts, if 4, 5, 7, 8 counties want to go together and tax themselves for projects in their area, that could be part of the solution. We've got to go to other states and look at best practices there, how they made some of these efficiencies, public-private partnerships, and all the rest. But we've got to have a governor who the people trust, and not the kind of guy who, 3 weeks after the last election, went out and bought a $6 million airplane that we don't need.
I just want to follow up here and just raise your hand. You don't have to say anything. Are all four of you suggesting that you don't want to have toll roads, you don't want to move sales tax to MoDOT, or you don't want a fuel tax? Is that what you're all four saying?
Jim,
raise your hand. Is that correct?
Just for clarity, what's the question?
Okay. Are you saying that MoDOT roads can get better if you do not either institute toll roads of higher fuel tax or shift sales tax or increase the sales tax earmarked for MoDOT? What I'm saying very clearly is that we don't need to raise taxes on the people of Missouri.
This is to all candidates. When we asked viewers what they wanted to hear from you, minimum wage came up more than any other topic. Michelle Reed on our Facebook page said the minimum wage should be a living wage. Where do you stand on raising the minimum wage, and what do you think it should be? We will start with Ms. Hannaway.
Well, I think the worst thing that we could possibly do in terms of being competitive with other states and bringing more jobs to Missouri is to piecemeal raise the minimum wage. For Columbia to have one minimum wage, for St. Louis to have another, for Kansas City to have a third, or for our state's minimum wage to be higher than states around us. What we need to do is win the competition for the best jobs. And we do that by becoming right to work, by having tort reform, and by having regulatory reform, as well as reducing our taxes. But, you know, we've all kind of said the same thing tonight. This election is going to come down to who do you trust? And there's one candidate on this stage who's talked repeatedly about rooting out corruption. And yet his biggest donor, Eric Greitens' biggest donor, who gave him $1 million, an investor from Silicon Valley, this week was alleged to have sexually abused a woman. I'm going to ask that my time be restored.
This is the final warning. Final warning.
I'd ask that my time be restored.
Yes.
This investor from Silicon Valley gave Eric Greitens $1 million for his campaign. A woman has alleged that this same contributor from Silicon Valley sexually abused her for over a decade. The contributor to Mr. Greitens' campaign has admitted he had a sexual relationship with her. He paid her $10 million in hush money.
All right, your time is up.
He agreed to pay her. I thought I was going to be restored. At least 10 seconds for the booing. I would boo it too. Sexual abuse of a woman is a serious issue. His employer cut all ties with him. He was removed from all corporate boards. The John Kasich campaign sent the money back. It's time for Eric Greitens to send his contribution back, or better yet, send it to a shelter for abused women.
All right, Mr. Greitens, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Sure. Well, unlike career politicians, I'm not going to convict someone in the court of public opinion. Let's see
his employer,
how this civil case,
who was closer to this situation than you were, was willing to cut all ties.
Madam Speaker.
Every corporate board he's on.
Mr. Greitens has 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you.
I think this is what happens when desperate politicians, get very desperate. Let's see how this civil case works itself out so that we can make a decision based on the facts and the judgments. And you know what, Catherine? I like you. I like Catherine, but you just can't trust her. And the reason why you can't is because she's willing to say all of these outrageous things. She's really willing to come before people. She's done this repeatedly.
Mr. Greitens, your 30 seconds is up.
I'm sorry. She's
your
willing to come before people.
You have a minute and a half now to respond to the question.
Catherine Hannaway has repeatedly come to people and said that she was in favor of concealed carry. But that's not the fact. The fact is she voted against concealed carry in 2003. And it wasn't just once. She was against concealed carry in 2002. She was against concealed carry in 1999. Her record on protecting your Second Amendment rights was so bad that the NRA gave her a D, a rating lower than Chris Koster. Now look, we need to have strong leaders who are willing to step forward. And unfortunately, Catherine is just another career politician who's desperate to run for office, who's willing to convict people in the court of public opinion. And that's wrong, ma'am.
Just a second. Catherine, you will be given 30 seconds to respond, but I want to remind you guys this question, which is from our viewers as well as your voters, is about minimum wage.
And Brittany, that's what I wish we could be talking about, is the future for people of Missouri.
Ms. Hannaway has 30 seconds to respond to your.
So nice diversionary tactic, Eric. The last time I ran for office, the NRA said that I was the best choice. And the sponsor of concealed carry legislation said it wouldn't happen without me. But I don't want to walk away from this issue of an abused woman that you won't take her word for it. I prosecuted hundreds of cases of child exploitation and abuse of women. Powerful men always try to suppress their voices. You should allow this woman's voice to be heard.
I'll respond now, Brittany. I'm sorry. Can I respond?
Is it time
Catherine Hannaway was
I believe it's time to move on to the question.
I would love to answer the question.
Mr. Kinder, you have 90 seconds to answer the minimum wage question.
Yes.
Look, the minimum wage raise, look, it's the law of this state now that we have a minimum wage that's indexed to inflation. The people voted that in. It's a statewide law. It goes up when inflation goes up. I support the current law. The idea that St. Louis should come in with a $15 minimum wage and announce to every entrepreneur and restaurant owner in town that they should move to St. Louis County or move to Illinois because the price of labor has been artificially raised by a vote of the Board of Aldermen is a bad signal to send to a declining city that's lost over 500,000 people in the last 60 years who've moved out. The youth unemployment rate in the minority community is 40 to 45%. One of the anecdotal and now proven by social science research facts that came out of Ferguson. One of the reasons we had the trouble that we had in Ferguson, because young men were walking around with nothing to do, no job. You talk about dead end and hopelessness, they drift into trouble. And at a time of 40 to 45% youth unemployment in the minority community, it is the wrong message to send for government to artificially raise the price of labor and price those ambitious young people out of the first rung on the ladder of economic opportunity.
Mr. Bruner.
Wow, good to be back. I tell you, I'm the one candidate on this stage who has employed thousands of people and created thousands of jobs. And nothing is more encouraging than to see the opportunities of young men and women continue to grow and expand. And veterans that we brought into our company, people from all walks of life and all backgrounds. You know, it's all about a living wage, and you're exactly right. It is a living wage, but you get a living wage by growing the economy for companies that are expanding, for people who feel a sense of an opportunity to be promoted in those companies. I've seen it first happen, and I've seen the impact when someone would come to me and say, John, come out to the parking lot, I want to show you something. And there, out there, would be a new Ford F-150. And he knew that he or she was able to put that down payment and knew that they could make 55 other down payments because they knew they had a future. Folks, it is about a living wage, and it's about an economy that's growing again, and it's about a business guy and an outsider that can come in and do across the state what I've had the privilege to do for our small business and live in the American dream and the principles of free enterprise. I'm looking forward to this because at the end of the day, it's what you can do for others. It's how you can help others. It's how you can lift other people up. And they have the opportunity to do the things that they want to do, to take care of their kids, to send them to school, to enjoy their part of the American dream. You need to get an outsider and a businessman in there to get the job done.
All right, thank you. Moving on from economic issues, following the incidents in both Ferguson and the University of Missouri, what should the governor or future governor do to solve problems relating to race in Missouri? This question is again for all candidates. Mr. Greitens, we'll begin with you. You have 90 seconds.
You know, I went out to Ferguson. And when Ferguson happened, I called my buddy Harlan, who I've been friends with since I was 15 years old. And Harlan said, yes, I know why you're calling, and I'm going with you. And when I went out to Ferguson, I can tell you the great tragedy of Ferguson was that if we had had a leader who had shown up with any kind of command presence and courage and calm and clarity, we could have had peace by the second night. But we had no leaders who were willing to go to the front lines. And you know what? Our police officers who were out there were abandoned. They deserve to have a leader who knows what it means to put on body armor and wear a sidearm. They deserve to have a leader who knows what it means to say goodbye to your family and step into the dark and do dangerous work. Our law enforcement officers need to have a governor who will have their back. And you know what? I served in the United States military. I did 4 tours overseas. And you know how we brought people together? We brought people together from every corner of this country. Every conceivable ethnic background, white, black, Asian, and Hispanic. And you know how we brought them together? We brought them together by giving people a positive vision for what we could do. It was hard sometimes serving in the military, but you know what? It was also a great joy. It was a great joy to wake up every day with people who are willing to commit themselves to serve a purpose that was larger than themselves. And rather than having politicians who drag us down into the mud, we need to have leaders who will bring us together to serve a common mission.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kinder.
I was in Ferguson on a number of occasions. I didn't see any of the other people on this stage there on the nights I went. I went without publicity. I didn't seek, I wasn't tweeting when I went there. I went there and worshiped in African American church of my African American friend, State Representative Tommy Pearson, from right there in the heart of Ferguson. I was on Chambers Road, I was on West Florissant Road, and last July 12th I went there back to that community to be the only statewide candidate in the history of this state who ever announced his candidacy for governor from North St. Louis County, from the communities of Ferguson and Dellwood. And I was flanked by the store owners who were burned out and looted out in the worst betrayal of leadership, misleadership in the history of this state by Jay Nixon and Chris Koster. They were burned out, and many of those store owners, minorities, and they are angrier at the protesters and the rioters than anyone. There has been no redress for their grievances, but they've found out they're Republicans now because they found a voice. They found someone who would stand up for them. I was introduced on that day when I announced my candidacy by a well-known African-American Democrat businessman in St. Louis who has come to my banner in more than one campaign and is supporting me now. I am the candidate who can unify us, but it starts with restoring law and order and standing with our peace officers.
Mr. Bruner.
The question was, of course, race in Missouri and what we can do about it. You know, my experience started in the Vietnam era, in a time when there's a disproportionate amount of minorities in the military and in the Marine Corps. And I tell you, we worked together as a team. We respected each other. We helped each other. We supported each other. They traveled across the Mediterranean, the East Coast, West Coast, North Atlantic. And we worked together as a team. And I took those same principles back into a small manufacturing business. Now, folks, this business is in Wellston. This is a neighborhood next to Ferguson, or about a mile or two down the road. This is an area that is tremendously economically depressed. I mean, businesses were leaving. We were the last company standing. The company next door went to Mississippi and then on to Mexico. But you know, we created hundreds of jobs in that facility. And we worked together as a team. Folks, I didn't need to run to Ferguson to check the box or to figure out what's going on. It's been 30 years here, helping people, encouraging each other, helping each other. You know, I have been at the funerals of my associates. I've been on those happy days at barbecues. You know, I've been with them when they've celebrated their successes. It is all about mutual respect, listening to the other person, and having a sense of justice as you talk with one another. It's about boots on the ground. It's old-fashioned leadership, being engaged and caring.
All right, and finally, Catherine Hannaway.
Thank you. Ferguson, the University of Missouri, all reflect a fundamental breakdown in trust, a fundamental lack of leadership. A big part of the problem in Ferguson was that our governor didn't have relationships in that community before it happened, and it certainly wasn't possible for him to build them after it happened. He had bad relationships with everyone involved. The first words he said when he got there were that the police officer should be indicted as soon as possible. That was an open invitation to rioters to come to our state from all over the country. Instead, what the governor should have done was go there and assess the facts and talk to people. And please listen, I have a concrete plan here beyond puffing out my chest and establishing a commanding presence. He should have had a curfew that was reasonable. If he was going to call up the National Guard and create a sense of hysteria and expectation that there'd be violence, he should have used the National Guard. He should have collected the facts. And no, I may never have strapped on a sidearm or put on body armor. But when you prosecute over 4,000 cases, you have U.S. Marshals come to your house and warn your kids and your nanny that there's been another death threat. So, of course, I'm going to stand up with the men and women of law enforcement that I have worked hand in hand with to make our state strong again.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question for Mr. Greitens. You'll have 60 seconds to answer this one. The other three candidates have been a little more vocal about their opinion about the protests that happened on the University of Missouri campus. As far as I can find, you have not been as vocal. What is your opinion about what happened on campus last November?
Well, what happened on campus last November was that we saw once again a complete lack of leadership. Our governor failed to show up. And you know what? I've worked with a lot of 19, 20, 21-year-old men and women. And the men and women who I've worked with, they've been launching aircraft off of aircraft carriers. They've been putting on 80 pounds of gear and walking through the deserts of Iraq and through the mountains of Afghanistan. And yet, there's a small number of them here on campus who are saying that today, life on campus is too tough. They need to have somebody who's willing to come here and tell them the truth. Here on the University of Missouri campus, 1 year of tuition, room, and board is more than half of the average family income here in the state of Missouri. We need to have leaders who are willing to come to the front lines and tell people the truth. And the truth is that if you're concerned about social justice, then let's go out and do something about it. Because right now in Missouri, only 1 in 4 of our fourth graders are reading at proficiency. Our students who are here on campus have incredible potential. Let's take that energy and let's use that in a productive fashion.
All right.
Candidates, we're going to keep on the University of Missouri theme and what has happened the past 5 months. Right now, lawmakers in Jefferson City are proposing about $7.6 million in cuts to the University of Missouri. If one of the 4 of you are elected, in your 2017 State of the State address, what would you say about University of Missouri funding? Mr. Bruner, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, the University of Missouri has been the gem here of the state of Missouri and around the nation. And we've all have a sense of pride, whether we've attended that university or we didn't. And it's done a lot for our state and our country. And the School of Journalism is known around the world. The Agriculture Department, there's a lot of wonderful things going on. But the problem that was occurred here in the last few months comes down to basic issues of accountability and standards and setting goals and direction. It comes down to that term called leadership, about being involved and being engaged. And it's important that we have standards and we have accountability, and that's all the citizens of Missouri want. Those of you at home are putting your good tax money into this institution. You'd like to see results. You'd like to see, a little less talk and a lot more action in terms of getting back and students learning and achieving their full potential, and a little less time out on the field protesting on the issues that are important for today, but should be solved with leadership, if leadership was involved and engaged on campus. A lot of it comes down to the curators as well. And as governor, I would ensure that we appoint talented, responsible curators, not just all lawyers in there to do the job, but people who really understand the education institutions and have provided leadership in the past. It's about leadership, it's about accountability, and it's about results. And I tell you, the University of Missouri will be coming back stronger than ever.
Catherine?
The Missouri legislature is not the only constituency to be very concerned about the university's future. Donations to the university have also plummeted. Enrollment is down. Until the leadership of the university begins to be more responsive to those constituencies, it is going to be difficult to rebuild our flagship institution. But I do believe the path forward for Missouri is to be the #1 agribusiness state in the country. We have unique resources here, and one of them is the agriculture school at the University of Missouri. We are also the only state in the country with navigable sections of both the Missouri and Mississippi River, with the animal science corridor in the west, the plant science corridor in the east. We have a north-south railroad to take our products to market. So the full spectrum, from the growers and producers who work the land through the PhD scientists who start the process all over again. We need the University of Missouri to be strong and to be a partner. But first, it's got to have leadership that will be responsive to those constituencies. That's why I will appoint a board of curators that will hold the line on 3 basic principles. Teachers will teach, scholarship athletes will play, and students will be able to go to class without muscle being called in. And those curators will represent all parts of the state and all walks of life, not just a number of lawyers.
Mr. Greitens.
Look, we've got a problem here on campus, and it's going to take action and it's going to take leadership. Let's be clear about the depth of the problem. It's not just Melissa Click, it's not just protesters. The Association of American Universities did a ranking of 62 major research universities in the country. Out of 62 major research universities, right here Mizzou ranked 62nd. Because of the lack of leadership and because this crisis spun out of control, this year there are going to be 1,500 fewer students who enroll on this campus. And that means that there is a $32 million budget hole. We are in a vicious cycle. Cutting that budget means that we're going to cut faculty salaries, which means it's going to be harder to attract quality faculty, which means that the quality of instruction might go down, which means that even fewer students might come together. Now, we have incredible resources here, incredible resources on this campus, and I believe that in Missouri we have some of the best college students in the country. We need to have a governor who's willing to go out and advocate for all of the great things that are happening, not just on this campus, but on campuses around Missouri. If we come together, we can find a way to build the best university system in the country so that every single young person who's graduating from high school has an opportunity in a community college, a vocational college, or right here at the University of Missouri to get a quality education with a pathway to a great job and a fantastic future.
Mr. Kinder.
Here I want to look right into the camera and speak to the people at home, because I hear you, Missourians across this state. What I'm hearing is you've had a belly full of what has gone on the campus of the University of Missouri here in Columbia. We have had a massive failure of leadership from the governor's mansion on down, and I hear you. We've had a governor who, just as in Ferguson, hid out in the mansion instead of coming over here and exerting some kind of leadership. I was looking for the first weekend, November 8th, when this trouble started, for university leadership, curators, a president, a chancellor, and a football coach who would say, there are no strikes on our football team. Scholarship athletes are privileged with free room and board, free tuition, and the best meals on campus in the dining hall. And in exchange for that, they suit up and play football, and if they don't, they jeopardize their scholarship. And it's far better to do that. And to have forfeited the game that Saturday, a few days off with BYU, and paid the $1 million penalty than to incur the $32 million loss we're looking at, according to Interim Chancellor Foley's email of last week, and in declining enrollment, and the $6 million drop in donations and bequests that the university suffered in what is usually their biggest month of December alone. I will fight for the budget of the University of Missouri, but we've got to level with the people of Missouri and everyone who's involved in governance of that school.
I have a follow-up for Mr. Bruner, but first, let's raise hands. You had nice answers, but you didn't answer my question. If elected governor, will you restore cuts to the university? If yes, raise your hand.
I will if the university leadership is responsive to the concerns of the people and the legislature.
I will. On the same basis, and the most promising thing here is the next governor will get 5 new curator appointments, and I will appoint the kind of curators who will carry out the policy I just enunciated.
Jim, the purpose of the budget is to actually create results. What we need is a governor who's willing to put a plan together for how we create a fantastic university, and then we'll build a budget around that plan.
Mr. Bruner, would you recommend budget cuts to the University of Missouri if the University Health Services continues to work with Planned Parenthood in Columbia?
I'm sorry, I was ready to answer the prior question.
The question is, would you recommend cuts to the University of Missouri if University Health continues to work with Planned Parenthood in Columbia?
I would continue to recommend cuts. But on the prior question, you set goals and objectives. You do that in business. When you hit your goals and objectives, you provide more resources, more funding. So let's set clear goals and objectives, and let's get the funding restored. That's the path I want to take.
Another question for all of you. Many of our viewers want to know where you stand on the legalization of marijuana, either for recreational use or medical use. On our Facebook page, Mike and Opal Wilson asked, why is alcohol and packing firearms legal when recreational marijuana is not? Given the potential for medical benefits and tax revenues, tell us your view. We'll begin with Mr. Bruner with 90 seconds.
Well, I'm against the legalization of marijuana. You know, the bigger issue, they look to marijuana for tax resources and revenues. It's all about jobs. It's about getting this economy back on track. It's about electing a business person as CEO of Governor of Missouri who understands intrinsically how to get the job done. And I've done this for over 30 years, and we have a huge opportunity here. Yes, are there merits in medical marijuana for people that are suffering? Of course, and that needs to be researched and carefully thought out. But the big issue, and governments are always looking for revenue sources. They don't understand if you grow the economy, if you add jobs, if you bring businesses back to the state, if you have a vision of Missouri being the distribution hub of America, the idea that our agriculture products are going to double in demand over the next couple decades, that manufacturing has a huge opportunity here in terms of distribution, that the expansion and development of the Panama Canal is going to make the Mississippi River even more viable, and getting the distribution off our roads and on our riverways. These are the real issues in terms of helping our economy and finding more revenues for the state of Missouri.
Mr. Kinder.
I'm on record as having supported medical marijuana when it is under a doctor's prescription for a terminally ill patient or one who's suffering from severe pain. As to the question of legalizing recreational use, it was close to 100 years ago that Mr. Justice Frankfurter of the U.S. Supreme Court said the states are the laboratories of democracy. That is, one of the geniuses of Madison's design of the Constitution was this diffusion of power between the central government, the federal government, and the states. And so we have experimentation in the states, and we're able to learn from both good and bad examples. I would cite everyone listening to the example of Colorado. You can read all about it, but know one thing. The Democratic governor of Colorado today, Mr. Hickenlooper, has said that legalization step they took a few years ago was a mistake. It was a mistake. I think we ought to be very cautious about going down that road. I want to say also about the exchange that occurred earlier. Eric, I don't think you're going to be able to maintain this with your $1 million donor. I do not believe you're going to be able to maintain this. What the man has already admitted to have caused his former business associates to sever ties with him. John Kasich did the honorable stand-up thing of giving back the money within a few hours of hearing about it.
Your time is up, and Mr. Greitens, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I won't need 30 seconds. I think, Peter, you're the last person on this stage, sir, who should be trafficking in tabloid stories about men hanging out in strip clubs.
And Mr. Kinder, you also now have 30 seconds to respond.
What your $1 million donor has admitted to, it really raises the question of who are these billionaires donating 6- and 7-figure sums to try to buy the governor's mansion in Missouri for a guy who was a Democrat about 18 months ago. A guy who says he's a conservative outsider. The only thing he's an outsider to is the conservative movement and the Republican Party in the state of Missouri. You've not been in any of these battles that we've been fighting for conservative causes.
Back to marijuana.
I'm sorry. I'm going to respond, Jim. No, Jim, I'm going to respond because I've been attacked. Yeah. And Peter said I haven't been part of any of these battles. I'm very proud of my service in Southeast Asia, in the Horn of Africa, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. And while you have been playing politics as a career politician, I was out on the field of battle happily defending our Constitution that I took an oath to defend.
Catherine, we'll get to you in a second. Didn't you go to the Democratic National Convention with former Governor Bob Holden?
Yes.
Jim, look.
Yes.
Jim, I've been very clear. I was born and raised a Democrat. My parents were Democrats. I was taught in 3rd grade, I think, that Harry Truman was the greatest president who'd ever lived. I'm a conservative because of the things that I've actually done. Running my own business, serving in the military, watching, Jim, as the government bureaucracy hurt my friends who came home. I am a conservative by conviction. And that's why I'm very proud of every day that I've lived.
Marijuana use.
Likely this won't come as a surprise to anyone, but because I was a prosecutor and prosecuted case after case where drugs had ruined the home lives, the families, the communities where they were being dealt, I oppose the legalization of marijuana, certainly for recreational purposes, and today I oppose it for the legalization for medical purposes, but I'm open to seeing more science. Look, addiction is a terrible problem. We all pay for it as taxpayers. At one end of the spectrum or the other. Either we pay for incarceration for people who've become addicted and got caught up in the culture, or on the welfare programs. I say let's move the funding that we're providing, the money we're spending on addiction, forward in the cycle to prevention, to recovery, so that we can save some families and some communities. It's so much better if we make an investment on the front end and prevent people from becoming addicted and perhaps reduce our prison populations as well. I think this provides not only for a safer Missouri, but for a better Missouri going forward.